Ahoy, and welcome in to another exciting episode of Not Allowed to Die, where I, Dan Magler, answer your questions about mental health, and along with my podcast partner, Mariska, the three-tooth Patterdale Terrier, explore dilemmas that I'm seeing in my private practice as a social worker and also as a school social worker. Today, Mariska is in fine form. You may hear her licking her paws in the background just a little bit, but you guys have been doing a great job of rating and reviewing the podcast. And we all know that when you rate and review, Mariska's paws feel better. So I really appreciate you continuing to do that. So today, Mariska's extra excited because she always loves it when we have a guest. And I could not be more excited to have Anissa Hudak, who is, as a yoga therapist and the founder of the Trauma Healing Yoga Therapy Program. Anissa works with women who have been sexually traumatized to help them heal their PTSD and other trauma-related issues with yoga therapy. As a two-time rape survivor, she intimately understands the needs these women face and helps them navigate their healing journeys. And so Anissa, I could not be more excited to have you because I think, healing from trauma, there are so many things that I'm excited we're going to be talking about, but healing people from trauma, I'm a big believer in the power of yoga. My next door neighbor in my office, she did her dissertation on the power of yoga to help clinicians heal from their burnout. But the idea of talking about both the power of yoga, separately, and again, before we started talking and connecting, I wasn't familiar with yoga therapy at all as a thing. So I would love it if you would just tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to getting where you are today.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I'm super excited, and I love talking about this. Not so much about myself, but about yoga therapy. So how did I get here? Well, I don't think anybody wakes up one morning and says, I want to be a yoga therapist and make people cry on their mat. Um, I started taking yoga teacher training classes because I didn't want to go to other people's classes. I wanted to do yoga on my own schedule and keep myself safe.
Mm-hmm.
And I took the first class. That was all I was going to take. And within a month, I had 2 job offers to teach yoga. And I thought, well, maybe there's something to this. The universe might be saying something. And so I started taking more teacher training classes to offer more things, more variety, kids yoga and things like that. And the school that I was going through, it's called Yoga Fit. They are a great school to go with. And they offer classes called warrior classes, and they were for military with PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I lived right outside of Fort Riley, which was it's military installation here in Kansas. My husband's active duty. We live in Manhattan, which is the town right outside, and a lot of active duty and retired live here. And we also have a warrior transition battalion here. So we have a lot of military, a lot of things going on. And I thought, I should take these classes and bring them back to my community. And I was about halfway through the first day, and I realized the first person I had to work on was right here.
Yeah.
And that at the time I had been raped when I was 18. And some other traumatic issues that had occurred throughout my life. And I realized that PTSD was really holding me back in ways that I didn't even see. And so it started this journey of self-discovery, self-recovery, and then being able to really help those around me who were like me and dealing with issues. I had the honor of working at Fort Riley. I worked for the WTB, the Warrior Transition Battalion, which is active duty and retired military with illnesses or injuries. And so I worked with them for over 3 years, which was wonderful. And then I just kind of decided, as much as I enjoy that, working with women who were like me really spoke to me. And at that point, a little over 6 years ago, I was raped again. And at that point, it really became very obvious to me that that's where I needed to be. And so that's what I've been doing.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that story. You've been through quite a bit, but again, what's amazing and exciting is that you're turning that into an experience of helping others. So Tell me a little bit about what's a session of yoga therapy like by comparison to just a regular yoga session? Can you tell me like what would a person experience if they were good and and where would they even find something like that? But like, so what would they find to be the difference if they're going into something?
Okay, so if we think of yoga as a big pie
Hmm.
and we split the pie in half, on one side we have fitness-based yoga,
Hmm.
which is great, and that's probably what you're going to find down at your corner yoga studio, right? Um, Ashtanga and Bikram and
Hmm.
um, co-ed naked hot yoga and
Yeah. Yeah.
aerial yoga and all of these wonderful variations.
Hmm.
And then on the other side we have yoga therapy.
Hmm.
And yoga therapy generally is where we've picked a niche that we work with, and we work with the people who really have specific needs, and they're not necessarily fitness based.
Hmm.
So we're talking about yoga for cardiac rehab, yoga for cancer, yoga for MS, yoga for Parkinson's, yoga for PTSD,
Hmm.
pelvic floor yoga therapy. I mean, there's all kinds. And we're really niching down and working with those folks to really meet their needs to get them either more functional,
Hmm.
more movement. Maybe it is more of a mind body connection, um, whatever it is that those folks need. And so we really specialize in that. If the way the yoga community is kind of broken up is that first you get a 200 level certification.
Okay.
And that's kind of like having a bachelor's.
Hmm.
And then from there, you could go on, you could do a 300 or you finish up the 200 and you get a 500. However, you do that, you get a 500.
Hmm.
And that's kind of like having a master's.
Okay.
And then when you go further, it's about 1,000 hours at least. And you get a yoga therapy certification. And that's like having a PhD.
Okay. So once you've got that certification, what it sounds like you're saying is you can really tailor yoga. And again, I think this is what I'm geeking out as you're saying this because I hear so many people saying, you know, I can't do yoga. Yoga's not for me, or therapy's not for me, or whatever else. And what I love that you're saying is no, yoga can be for anybody. And there can be a ramp that can be created to helping you get there. So even if you're saying, I have knee pain, I can't do that, that with working with the right person who really has the experience in crafting that and finding a group that would be able to do it together, like no one should feel like there's a barrier to entry that they couldn't possibly start yoga. Is that what I'm hearing? Can you say?
Absolutely. And, for somebody who says, I have knee pain, well, did you tear your meniscus?
Hmm.
Did you happen to have, a knee surgery? Um, you know, it, so there are folks who can help with rehab. However, if you do go down to your corner yoga studio,
Hmm.
the instructors there might be educated enough to
Hmm.
know how to handle that situation. So
Hmm.
it really depends on what your needs are. You could check with the instructors at your local studio, or you can go to a website called the International Association of Yoga Therapists, IAYT,
Hmm.
and you can look up whatever your situation is, yoga for Parkinson's or what have you, and you can find folks that are designated
Hmm.
with that certification and work with that.
Okay. So for a PTSD trauma survivor, what would like yoga for them look like that would be different than what they're getting in goat yoga or in, that Bikram fitness yoga? So how would like the session, would it be again, I'm guessing that there's not a lot of talking happening during it. So what is the yoga instructor? Are you kind of doing more leading or what does that look like?
Actually, we talk the whole time.
Really? Okay.
It is incredibly interactive.
Okay.
So, my scope of practice is to help you move the PTSD out of your body.
Okay.
The body stores trauma on a very cellular level, and we need to move that out. That
Hmm.
is my scope of practice. I am not a talk therapist, I'm not a
Hmm.
social worker, and so that's not my scope.
Hmm.
However, I need to keep your mind occupied while you're there because,
Hmm.
when it gets quiet and there's stillness, that's kind of where the scary stuff
Hmm.
lives. So, we talk the whole time.
Hmm.
Generally, what's everybody doing for the weekend? How's everybody's week going? We talk a lot about food.
Okay.
We talk a lot about food. Um, So how does a class differ? Well, number one, the lights always stay on.
Okay.
Number two, I never leave my mat.
Okay.
And if I leave my mat, I announce I'm leaving my mat. I tell you where I'm going and what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody likes, especially when you have PTSD, you don't like somebody walking around. You never know where they're at. Are they behind you? There's none of that. I very rarely touch any of my students, my clients.
Mm-hmm.
And again, if I do, I'll cue something 10 times
Mm-hmm.
in order to get somebody into the right type of a position. However, if I can't and I have to touch, I'm going to announce where I'm going. I'm going to announce what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to ask if I can touch them
Mm-hmm.
and then help them. There are no straps in my
Okay.
class. I think that's probably self-explanatory.
Okay. Yes.
Again, we talk the whole time. The class is generally a little bit slower. There
Okay.
are some folks who might have physical issues, especially when I was working at the WTB, we had soldiers who were, crutches, wheelchairs, braces, all kinds of things. So we had a lot of physical issues. And then we also had the injuries that you don't see.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the class is generally a little bit slower.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really about creating this mind-body connection,
Mm-hmm.
having them be present.
Mm-hmm.
And then for Shavasana, which is final relaxation,
Mm-hmm.
you get the option, you can generally you lay on your back, palms are facing up. So it's kind of a spread eagle, very vulnerable type of position.
Mm-hmm.
And now some of my folks can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. They can lay on their stomach, they can lay on their back, they can lay on their bellies, they can use pillows and blankets and anything to make themselves cozy. The lights remain on. I have eye pillows if they wish to block
Mm-hmm.
out the light if they would like.
Mm-hmm.
And I read to them.
Mm.
So
Okay.
again, they're not really alone with their thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And I read, I have lovely books of yoga poetry
Okay.
or the emotional aspects of essential oils.
Okay.
And it's really funny. I will read a couple of pages out of that, a couple of different oils, and then someone inevitably after Shavasana says, I need this oil.
If you were saying things, that'd be the
I
way to
gotta
do
try that. So that's kind of the differences.
it. Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, we're doing, different asanas and poses, just like
Mm-hmm.
everybody else would do in a yoga class.
Well, and I think, what people, there's a lot of people who have misconceptions about PTSD. And it is fortunately, fortunately and unfortunately, it's one of the most researched and studied disorders in mental health because of the military and because a lot of the people who are suffering from it, because they're getting help from the VA or other places, they'll participate in research studies and whatnot. But so people can have trauma and not exactly have post-traumatic stress disorder. But when we're talking about that, we're sometimes seeing, to meet criteria for that, a body response to like stimuli that isn't actually dangerous, where they're getting really activated and a lot of stress responses. So is what if after people are participating in this yoga therapy, it sounds like you're saying that a better ability to control that for themselves, a better connection to self-soothe. Is that kind of what people might get out of the yoga therapy?
Potentially, we know that with PTSD, the brain and the body are not
Mm-hmm.
online. They
Mm-hmm.
are on totally different wavelengths.
Mm-hmm.
What we're doing in the class is bridging that. We are
Mm-hmm.
bringing the brain back online with the body
Mm-hmm.
so they can actually feel their body again.
Yeah.
And so, not only is there sensation in the body, but we're also, working out some of that trauma, letting them literally put down some of that baggage that they're carrying,
Mm-hmm.
creating a greater bandwidth. And so when they are faced with another situation where they're feeling like they're activated, they have a little bit more bandwidth to be able to respond instead of react.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times over time, they learn how to take that breath
Mm-hmm.
and pause before they go launch right into a reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And so these are some of the things that we're finding that folks are able to do with, taking these classes.
Well, and what I love about what you're saying is what everything, what you, as you've described it, to me, it sounds so safe. And I think for a lot of, people I work with who have trauma, they feel, again, the therapy office can feel intimidating because it's kind of like a puppy with a wounded paw. They want to keep that away. They don't want to, they're afraid that talking about it might trigger and activate them. And so they're afraid that they might not be in control of the interaction. And what I love about what you've described is it sounds like the people who are participating really, it's on their choice level. They're having a lot of control. They're never being taken to a space that feels unsafe to them.
There's a lot of psychology that goes into what I do.
Hmm.
A lot of the language is, not, "Okay, we're gonna move into down dog."
Hmm.
It is, "Come join me in down
Hmm.
dog." "Now we're going to meet in cobbler pose," or whatever
Hmm.
um, "When you're ready, will join me here." I'm giving them back their agency.
Hmm.
When we have been in a traumatic, experience, someone took away our control.
Hmm.
And now I'm offering them back the control over their body. They
Hmm.
have the option. They can choose when they're gonna meet me in that pose. Maybe they really like the pose they're in and they wanna stay.
Hmm.
Stay, meet me when you're ready. They're given that choice back
Hmm.
and that agency over their body again, and so that's very empowering. And the beauty of it is that when someone's working with me and then they're able to walk into your office and work with
Hmm.
you, they're gonna have more bandwidth. They're gonna have a little bit more peace and calmness to them, and they might be ready
Hmm.
to walk through that door.
Yeah. Now, is this something I kind of get I can imagine a person benefiting from this for doing this for 20 years, but is it like, do you try to suggest that people like, is there a recommended amount of time that people would try this or come to it? Or is it like, no, it's whatever feels comfortable to that individual? Like, so do you guys do time limited or you say, hey, trauma-based therapy, I mean, yoga is happening on this day at this time and whoever wants to join us can, and are they closed groups or open groups to coming to that or?
Well, right now, I'm actually getting ready. I do private one-on-ones, and
Okay.
that's with everyone, male and female.
Okay.
It's an hour-long session. It's via Zoom. Everything
Okay.
I do now is online.
Oh, cool.
Well, I live in Kansas, and the
Right.
cows are not digging the yoga. The bison like it, but the cows not so much.
Weird. Okay.
Go figure. So, I'm all online now, but I'm in the process of getting ready to launch a membership for women who've been sexually assaulted,
Mm,
and it's gonna be live and recorded sessions along with education and, a community for us.
that is so cool because a lot of times people, again, they don't want to necessarily leave their house or go to a place where, oh, what are you going to that for? Oh, yoga. Oh, can I come? And it's like, I don't want to explain any of that. So the fact that they can do it in the privacy of their own home and not necessarily have anybody else knowing about it. Was it a transition for you? Like, when did you first start doing yoga online with people? Did that happen in the pandemic or were you doing that before the pandemic?
I actually started before the pandemic,
Mhm.
and then, the pandemic actually found me in a household with, my 2 boys and my husband,
Uh-huh.
and very little bandwidth.
Okay.
And I mean Wi-Fi bandwidth, not
Yeah.
yet well, probably both bandwidth, actually. So, I kind of took a hiatus,
Mhm.
um, and then so now I'm back to it, actually.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, I actually started doing more yoga during in the start of the pandemic because other workout places were closed, and my wife had this Core Power subscription and things like that, and I was like, oh, okay, I hadn't tried this before, and it's like for the people who are doing fitness based yoga, it is an incredible workout. But again, it's nice to know that there are like this is kind of an option. What else do you wish, back to your 18-year-old self, like when did you first start doing yoga? And what do you wish you could have told that, like, if you could have found this sooner, how might, that have helped you or other people, if they had been able to get into this, sooner after an issue?
I didn't come to yoga until 2006,
Okay.
and so I had already been raped at that point. Um, it's funny you say that because when I was raped again 6 years ago, I kinda sat down and I I thought really long and hard about it, and I kind of put my clinician hat on, and I said, "Okay,
Mhm.
you know, what would you tell your client to do?
Mhm.
Okay, now take that hat off. Now you gotta go do the work."
Mhm.
But also too, what do what did I want back then and what do I want now? What do I
Mhm.
see? What is lacking?
Mhm.
And when you look at other self-help groups like AA, NA, even the VFW,
Mhm.
what is it about? It's about the community. And I
Mhm.
felt like women who were like me didn't have a community.
Mhm.
We don't need to talk about why we're there. We
Mhm.
all know why we're there. We don't need the gory details. We just want to support each other in healing.
Mhm.
And so that's what I just decided I was going to create.
It's so cool. Yeah. And so right now, how do you get referrals from people that you've worked with as a just doing more local yoga stuff, or how do you get connected to people right now?
Online.
Okay,
Everything's online.
so people
And
just go to your website, search you, and then they can find ways to connect.
trauma healing yoga, I'm like a bad penny. I just kind of keep showing up all over social media. Traumahealingyoga.com. But what's brilliant is that being online, I can work with women all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just not an American thing, so
Mm-hmm.
I can work with women all over the world. And I do. I have women in many different countries that are with me. So it's nice that we have each other.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. No, I run a trauma survivors group, and just I was thinking as you were saying, the vast majority of the time in group, unless someone brings something up, we're talking about everything else under the sun. But it's just people being able to be in a space together where they don't have to say it, but they know they don't have to worry about that judgment or other things. And um, it is just so unfortunate. This trauma is so common and yet so unspoken, and I don't know what we have to do as a society to change that. What are some other things like misconceptions that you're seeing out there, whether they be about yoga, about just sexual trauma, about anything that you're saying, I wish more people knew, or about PTSD, anything in your experience that you could share with the audience of just, what are you seeing that people are having a mistaken impression about?
Well, that's a loaded question. Um,
Mhm.
where do I start?
Yeah.
Um, so they say that 1 out of every 4 women have been sexually assaulted.
Hmm.
Generally, it's actually 1 out of every 2,
Wow.
but due to underreporting,
Hmm.
they, we really think it's 1 out of 2. So that's number 1. Number 2, rape DNA kits are at a
Hmm.
5-year backlog for being processed here in America. And
That's
so
the thing. I wish if I was going to start a GoFundMe or I can't comprehend how we as a society are willing to tolerate this. Anybody who wants to be tough on crime or anything, whatever political persuasion you come from, how we can possibly tolerate this backlog of rape kits, and if we can get an entire industry to make a vaccine for a disease that didn't exist a few years ago, how do we not have the science and the scientists? I'm sorry I interrupted you, but I couldn't agree more. That it just galls me every day that the thinking about the fact that someone else might be getting victimized by a person who we could, do something about it. We have the DNA, we have the evidence. So I apologize for interrupting, but
no, and, with it sitting there for 5 years, it's degrading.
mhm,
And so there's a possibility that the results could be inconclusive because it's sat for so long.
mhm,
So there's that. So that's another thing that I have a beef about. Um, I really hate the fact that by the time you're in high school, you know that if you break your arm,
mhm,
you're going to go to the hospital, you're going to get an X-ray, and you're going to probably be put in a cast or a splint or something like that, right?
mhm,
You're going to know how to heal that broken arm. However, when you need to reset your central nervous system, no one teaches you how to do that. And yet
mhm,
you've got one,
mhm.
and it's gonna happen.
And we use it constantly. You're never not using your central nervous system. So,
And you're not told how to reset it.
nope, no.
How is that? I think that that's the greatest sin walking. How do we not know how to reset our central nervous systems? We know how to take care of a broken arm.
Mhm.
I I don't get it.
Well, and I think that's this again, back to these general misconceptions that yoga is something that is just left of center or just fringe or whatnot, and isn't something that really. And again, what it's based around, as you said, is connecting our mind and our body and our emotion and movement. And we know that from an education standpoint or anything else, if I want to teach someone to remember all the state capitals, if I can have them moving while they're trying to remember it, the chances of them remembering that are so much greater. And so, how much more? And it's something that's truly lacking. They found after the genocide in Rwanda, they tried to give traditional talk therapy to a lot of the people who had survived it, and it just wasn't working because these people did not want to go into a dark room with one stranger and talk about their trauma and the things they'd experienced. But when they eventually pivoted and talked to people from there, and they eventually started really having success with dance sort of therapy and getting people together, moving in a community. And so I can only imagine that you're like, this is, as you're saying, connecting back to how we are wired as creatures. And it's going to work a lot better if we could work with that than rather against it and saying, oh, this is just for people who are hippy dippy or whatnot. It's like, no, this is science. The science is leading the way in coming to that and understanding that this can really help.
I hate to burst everybody's bubble, but I'm going to do it. Everything I do is science-based.
Yeah.
I hate to be the bearer of bad news. When I started really taking the trauma-informed classes,
Hmm.
I would come home, and my husband is an organic chemist.
Okay.
He teaches high school chemistry. And I would say, da, 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 da. And he said, that's like biology stuff, right? I'm like, yeah, I know. He's like, everything you're doing, everything you're talking about is all science. Yeah, I know. There's no smoke and mirrors. There's no voodoo. This is not witchcraft.
Hmm.
Um, it's all science. And quite frankly, all of yoga is science. And I know people are going to be like, what? Yeah, it is. It's all science. Um, I don't know how these old guys in India figured it out,
Hmm.
but they did. And it's all about working with the body and not against it.
Well, it's shocking that maybe a culture that was lasting for over 1,000 years might have learned something or a trick or two along the way. That
Could you
maybe we can
imagine? I mean,
maybe we can,
what are
maybe we
the
can
odds?
learn some people. And yeah, I think that's a huge, and it's one of the problems in the way we do, in mental health particularly. We come from this thing called the medical model, which is a very Western science way of we look at a symptom and we try to isolate the symptom and treat the symptom as if it's not connected to an entire person.
Correct.
And having an entire, like, again, what I think yoga is doing, and again, what I'm hearing you say is it's let's interact with the whole person. Let's connect this. And what, as social workers, one of the things we try to say, we stand out from, nothing against the psychologists or other people, but we try to say, we want to be strengths based. And we want to say, hey, even if you've got this one issue, 95% of you is still working great. Let's try to focus on that and build off of your strengths. But now with yoga, we're doing all these things at once. So it's kind of a cooler way that that's happening.
And what's really nice is that we are able to collaborate with folks like you.
Hmm.
And if someone has some sort of an experience in a class,
Hmm.
you know, I can and should be able to give you a call and say, hey, I had your client in class.
Hmm.
This is what happened. You know, I suggested that they unpack it with you, but I just wanted to give you a heads up that this is what was said, this is what occurred. We should be able to, and I have collaborated with folks like you, just like that.
Hmm.
And so that's the way it should be working
Hmm.
because that does happen. Now, I'm not a talk therapist. That's
Hmm.
not my scope of practice. But I should be able to reach out to you and say, "Hey," and you should be able to reach out to me and say, "Hey, this is what's going on. This is what I'm observing, blah, 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 blah."
Right. Busting down those silos and kind of working together, surrounding people to kind of to get them to help them to achieve their goals wherever their goals are. And the more people are territorial about that and saying, no, do my way and not your way, there's space for all of it. And that's again the title of my podcast, Being Not Allowed to Die. I don't care how a person gets to healing. I'd love to put myself out of business. I wish no one ever needed talk therapy ever again. But
Exactly, yes.
yeah. So how let's work together and let's help people to get to this healing and realize that they can be there. So many people who are trauma survivors, they feel betrayed by their bodies, even having one. And to say your body is not the problem. The problem is there are people out there who have violated it. And you use that term trauma informed. And that's one of the things that some people aren't aware of. We need to build a trauma informed society. And all it means is a recognition that there are so many people who have, whether they're, right now the word ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, or traumas that have come up throughout their lives. If we know the population, whether it's 1 in 2 people have experienced trauma, whether it's max 1 in 6, regardless. And probably, again, it's probably more like, 2 out of 3 have experienced some sort of trauma if we open it up to different kinds of trauma. So why are we acting like this is the aberration? So if we just build our society in a way where we can work around that and not stigmatize and shame people for having gone through an experience and having emotions that have gotten a little bit out of sync because of the experience that they've had. Once we can do that, it's going to help people to feel more normalized and to get the help and care that they need.
So I am going to disagree with you.
Okay.
I would have to say, I don't think that there's anyone
Mhm.
living this human experience that does not have some sense of PTSD. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Now, we have high functioning
Mhm.
and we have those who are not so high functioning.
Mhm.
We need to work with everybody. And yes, I totally agree with you that we need to create more of a trauma informed society. Absolutely, because we're all
Mhm.
affected by it. And if there, by chance, there is that one rare rabbit out there that doesn't, they're dealing with everybody who has it.
Right. Right.
So, that can be traumatizing all in itself. So, yes, you know, I, again, we have the central nervous system and we're not taught how to reset it.
Yeah. Well, again, this has been just so fantastic. I feel like I could talk to you for an hour and a half, but again, just we want to direct people back to so it's healing. I'm sorry, it's a
TraumaHealingYoga.com.
traumahealingyoga.com for anybody who's interested in learning more. And any other, you already said that one IAYT website, any other places that you would direct people to look and go if they're looking for more things, let's say they want to do something in person in their area, any other suggestions that you would say people should start with if they're looking for this kind of service?
Um, I would really say the IAYT, and if for some reason you're not able to find somebody, if you reach out to me personally,
Mhm.
I know a lot of folks
Okay.
who, are in lots of different places, and we might be able to hook you up with somebody in your area. So that would be the other alternative.
Well, again, thank you so much for your time today
Thank
and for the
you.
work that you're doing. This is so interesting and so informative. So, for everyone who's listening, do whatever it takes to get you through this world. If you have never considered yoga, no matter who you are, I really ask you to try it out and consider it because I don't, personally, in my experience, I don't think there's anybody who could not benefit in some way from at least trying it. Might not be your thing, but go out of your comfort zone and give it a try and do whatever it takes to get you through this world. And remember, you are just not allowed to die.